For more, I'm joined by cybersecurity analyst Alex McGeorge in Washington. He's the head of Threat Intelligence at Immunity Incorporated. Alex, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Investigators, they haven't pinpointed whether this was a state-sponsored act or whether this is Russia, an obvious suspect, many people are saying. But what's the evidence? Could another government be behind this? And we know that someone has claimed responsibility. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think it's a difficult thing because the security on these devices, right? And we're talking, when we say the Internet of Things, right? What we really mean is like, your cable DVR box, maybe your thermostat, maybe some of your kitchen appliances. The security on these devices is so poor that it doesn't take a nation state worth of sophistication to be able to compromise them and turn them into something that is able to inflict this sort of disruption on our services. So it certainly could be Russia. That fits into a lot of narratives at the moment, but it doesn't have to exclusively be the provenance of a nation state for this type of attack.
How does this cyber attack compare to other recent hacks that we've seen? There was the breach at the DNC. Other breaches have happened. Where does this sort of land in that scope?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't necessarily categorize this as a breach per se, because nothing has been breached, right? There is no illicit access of the networks that are involved. What this is more of is you have all of these devices, over 10 million IP addresses, according to the ISPs that are involved in this, that were started hammering very specific services that kind of connect the internet and make it work in a way that human beings can understand, right? We call it the domain name system. So instead of an IP address, you can go to www.google.com. So because they were hammering on that so hard, it made things like Netflix, Spotify, Twitter impossible to get to. So from a scope perspective, I think there was a lot more people who were affected and who would have noticed something. But from a security standpoint, this isn't a breach in the same way that the DNC hack was or the Yahoo breach was.
And how does the U.S. retaliate? What are the country's options?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people, in my sphere who are trying to say, well, we should respond in kind. We should, invoke the cyber option. Honestly, I think what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to rely on what it's always relied on, and that is economic sanctions. It worked really well with North Korea after the Sony hack. The threat of it worked really well when Obama and Xi Jinping discussed establishing cyber norms between the U.S. and China. So I would have to say it's probably going to be something like that. If this takes on a different tenor, like if we're able to prove that it was Russia, and these sorts of attacks happen during the election or on elections day, then I think the response may be more than we're used to seeing from the U.S., maybe more than economic sanctions. It could involve response in kind of some variety.
Alex, what's the buzz? Are people concerned about election day?
Well, the buzz is really interesting. So, we have, from the Trump camp, there are a lot of interesting things coming out in terms of the narrative is that the election is rigged and so forth and so on. So what we're concerned about is if an attack like this happens on election day, is that going to make people more nervous about an already testy and perhaps a contested election? Is that going to feed into people's fear? I think the answer there is yes, it could. And that would definitely be very bad for peaceful transfer of power and everything that Americans, at least in my lifetime, have really come to expect from when we go to vote and how we do elections.
Well, for subscribers, if you've been on these websites like Netflix or Spotify in the past 24 hours, should you be concerned about your personal data, and what should you do?
No, I don't think there's any real need to be concerned about your personal data. The attack focused on making sure that you weren't able to access Netflix services at their optimum quality, or even access Netflix at all. So for folks who, were not able to get to Netflix or Twitter or maybe another part of, their daily internet browsing habits, there's really not a whole lot you need to worry about. And unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot you can do. This has to be sorted out by the ISPs at a national network level. We don't really have a whole lot of influence on it. I'm sure there's some poor geek who's sitting at a data center in a server cage or a network switch cage who's really pulling his hair out, and I feel bad for them. But there's not a lot we can do, and honestly, there isn't too much that people need to be worried about in terms of their privacy or personal data.
Alex McGeorge, thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much.